Actually, before I start, I just want to do one thing real quick on my device here. All right, cool. I actually just voted. I had a conversation with my government just through my handheld device. You might be asking how I was able to do that and what I just did. I was able to give my opinion on whether or not a children's hospital should be built just 6 kilometers away from where I live. I'm able to do this right now because today I'm coming to you from the year 2050. You might be wondering how I'm able to actually create these micro interactions with this government, whether it's at the local level, the state level, or the national level. And you'll understand, or you could see that I just was able to vote on the children's hospital, if it should be built. I can also reach out to give my opinion on the state level, whether they should enact these new type of regulations around cargo drone policies, and then also on the national level to even give my voice and give my opinion and make it heard on whether they should do their second manned mission to Mars, the one that's between the UAE and with NASA. And so you could kind of understand where this came from back in the early 2010s when Facebook was able to start delivering this customized news feed that you'd be receiving just on a daily basis. It's somewhat similar to that, but instead of a customized news feed, you're getting a customized government feed. You're able to have personalized information and personalized policies directed to you based on who you are, based on where you come from, based on your family, based on what you do. And this all plays into a part of creating a more inclusive and much more inclusive and much more egalitarian government and citizen interaction. And what I'm going to say is that I just came from the citizen point of view of being able to talk to my government, and I was able to create that one data point of saying, yes, I want this children's hospital to be built. So then what happens with that data point? That'll actually go to a decision-making committee within the government. And this decision-making committee could be an individual, it could be a whole entity, whatnot. But it's part of a government that is based on 3 things. One, it is project-oriented. 2, it's distributed. And 3, it's enabling. And so when we talk about project-oriented, we're imagining that our government in the year 2050 will be able to actually take on new initiatives that arise due to society changes. And instead of having a place where this initiative will be within the puzzle of the governmental structure, for example, drone regulation, does that go under the Ministry of Aviation? Does that go under the Ministry of Transport? What we actually do is we create mission-based teams that could come together and pull all the resources from every aspect of the government, whether it's human capital, technology, to allow these mission-based teams to be much more agile and much more effective and much more timely in meeting the quick changes of society. Second, a distributed government. This is coming to the point where back in the 2010s, it was more of, is it going to be centralized or is the pendulum going to swing to a decentralized government? What we see now is a completely distributed government that's based on connectivity and integration. So if I go back to where the citizen was able to create that one data point, his opinion on the children's hospital. That data point was then brought to the government and put into an aggregated data set of the full stakeholder opinions. So now this decision-making committee has an understanding of where their citizens' stake is, while at the same time within this distributed structure be able to reach out, whether it's to find the predictive financial modeling of what will be the impact of this children's hospital based on what's the predictive outcome on the economic or social sense, all from reaching out throughout a completely connected government. And then this leads to, once you're able to provide the information and deliver the details of creating this much more inclusive, open viewpoint for government decision makers, how do you actually enact this policy? And so this is part of enabling. We see that there was this big structure called public procurement, and it often was very slow moving, very timely to account for governance, but left open holes for corruption. And so what we learned was from the shared economy that came around in the 2010s, you're actually able to take on major projects and split them into very small, manageable pieces that wouldn't just be shared with one contractor or one entity, but could be split out and actually disperse the responsibility and the value created throughout the whole private economy and then society as a whole. And so what does this lead to? This leads to agile policymaking on the side of the government, meaning that they have the information readily available to them with the support of technology, be able to bring it to the right level of government, whether it's the state level, the national level, and have an inherent feedback loop because they can still communicate in real time to their society, to their stakeholders, to their citizens. And what does this mean actually to the citizens? It means that they are no longer at the bottom of a triangle where the top is just where there's closed off information and closed off decision making. That triangle is actually flipped so that they're the ones on top and they're the ones producing and providing the opinions to those that are then going to make that decision at the end of the day. And what we want to touch upon too is just how did we get here? How we got here was through three main areas. One, revamping of education. We were able to, of course, connect and reach out to all the villages and all the classrooms, but we weren't just teaching the basic 1, 2, 3s and ABCs. We changed it to actually skills that citizens needed to provide positively to society. That meant whether it's coding or programming, or whether it's the idea creation and the project management abilities. At the same time, we made a big push towards openness and connectivity within the government, but also with the private sector, because we were able to realize the shared value that comes about when you actually provide, or when you actually open up your data, take away the proprietary boundaries to it, and are allowed to actually create more value from being able to provide from the public side and the private side to better society. And then third, going around and making people trust technology to support their society. And this, of course, meant through cybersecurity, but also on the other end, taking into account accountability and traceability with blockchain technology. And so what does this lead to at the very end? You have a project-oriented, distributing, enabling government that opens up and maintains a positive dialogue with the citizens, while at the same time, with the support of technology, develop a government that at the end of the day is still driven by people.
So I'm Sam, I'm from UCL, and I'm part of the Science, Engineering and Public Policy department at UCL on the Faculty of Engineering. And so today we're going to present to you our, what we think the future of the government will look like. So, the way that we view, we approach public policy is through taking a systems approach. We take a very engineering and science view on how to tackle public policy, and we do this by looking at all kinds of complex problems and taking a 35,000 foot view of what is going on. This helps us get a bigger understanding of more complex problems. Things like malnutrition, aging populations, mass unemployment, as something like Elon Musk talked about yesterday, climate change, water sanitation, things like this. And so we've tried to prioritize looking at complex problems as the way that governments will be able to look into the future. And so our idea for this is something we've called fluid government. The idea for this is that it's organized around expertise rather than organized around departments. So, and the expertise is to tackle the problems that we've kind of highlighted before. It will use unsupervised machine learning, and that's something whereby you're not telling a machine or a computer how to understand what is going on. It works out its own, it draws out tags and themes from discourse between officials and experts within departments across the whole government, and then it takes that information and tries to calculate it into different types of networks based on similarities and differences. And these other data inputs can also come from citizens as well. So through citizen consultations and stakeholder engagement, the machines will be able to understand what is valued and how these things are linked. So you get a better appreciation for the complexity of these problems, and that they're not in isolation and they're not to be treated separately. This is based on similar concepts like Democracy OS is currently another platform which is using a similar structure for this. We also thought about the idea of tiger teams, where you have experts come in to work tackle a specific event to tackle a specific problem, and kind of using this kind of expertise-focused approach to tackling complex problems, rather than having a siloed situation within departments within governments at the moment, where very often you have lots of people working on the same thing, but they're very isolated between each other. So to kind of work how it might work, we thought about having, so green infrastructure as an example. You have a finance department which might be looking at green investment to try and encourage green infrastructure. You might have an energy department looking at ways that green roofs and green walls can help insulate buildings to reduce or to make buildings more energy efficient. You have departments like the environment looking at biodiversity and ecology approaches to green infrastructure, and then you have water, which may be looking at it to mitigate floods and things like this. And so we felt that, like, in this instance, these people probably communicate. Several experts within these departments are probably talking to each other or working on similar issues. They may be even engaged in similar stakeholders as well, and engaging with citizens in a similar way. If they're trying to put a new park or some other kind of green infrastructure in an area, then this may be something that they're working on together, like same kind of topic, but doing it separately. And the idea is that the machine learning will recognize that these people are all talking about the same types of issues, and it would aggregate them in a way that you'd be able to visualize this through like a network analysis. That would then indicate to the people within government that actually we can group these people together to tackle this issue rather than having them tackle it individually through their departments. It would help improve resource efficiency, and it would also help you tackle the complex problems from a more interdisciplinary approach. This is something we've seen throughout the whole summit, is that actually we have many different people here from all kinds of backgrounds, geographically and professionally, and tackling these problems needs that kind of interdisciplinary approach, which can be facilitated through this fluid learning. So following that, we would organize it by green infrastructure and have the various experts from the different departments who are working on green infrastructure organized that way, rather than organized within their departments. The way that we see this going is that you would slowly train the civil servants and the government to become less attached to their departments, and the actual experts would own their expertise. So rather than trying to join the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, you become an expert in agricultural technology, and that is where your value is. And so you own your expertise so that you can then work on other complex problems. The nature of the machine learning is that in an unsupervised fashion, is that it will constantly be taking data and input and communications, and so that these communications will be constantly evolving. So it will happen over time that perhaps something like green infrastructure becomes, in a certain area, maybe really become agriculture focused. Perhaps urban agriculture will really take off. And then actually you have people from the agricultural departments who also need to become involved in this project. And so it would be constantly improving the data, and it would happen gradually over time so that the experts would be able to tailor their approaches to these problems much better. And there are some drawbacks, of course. Either very often departments have a lot of turf that they are very protective over. They have their own resources, their own budgets. They have their own experts they don't want to let go or move to other departments. And that's something that we recognize is an issue, but it would be something that would require lots more training from departments, and also lots of data scientists and analysts to help interpret this data, and also then to communicate this to the policy makers as well. And this can be something that the data scientists, it's a fairly new field in that sense, something which like the youth populations are very much engaged in and are being trained for. And so it would help in some countries where that's a big of an issue at the moment, it would help provide jobs for these people as well. So that's just one of the challenges that we're thinking about at the moment. Again, the technology is complex, but it does, we could get there, especially by 2050. We considered looking at a problem-focused approach, but actually we realized that humans are much better at taking a value-based approach to understanding what these problems are and how to assess the solutions to improve them, rather than having the system determine what that might be. And that's the premise of how we think the future of government will be, is that we think it's going to be fluid, and we think that it's going to just, it will be using this kind of machine learning to improve how we tackle these complex problems from a systems view. And that is all.
I wanted to start very quickly with a story. And that story, or rather the picture that I want to paint for you, is a world in which pharmaceuticals are not available. It's a world in which the lithium-ion batteries that Elon Musk was talking about yesterday don't exist. Now, fortunately for all of us, that's not the world that we live in. We have pharmaceuticals, we have batteries, electric cars. Science has given us a lot of hope. But unfortunately, in many parts of government, and in politics particularly, that same dedication to rigor and science does not always exist. And so our vision for future government is one in which data, which I'm sure many groups are going to be talking about today, is at the very heart and soul of government. And in the process of putting data and the scientific method at the process of government, or in the institutions of government, we're going to be able to move government away from politics and towards policy. And I think that's something that's particularly relevant for people who live in the United States today. So here's the framework that we've come up with to kind of think about the idea of putting data at the heart of government. Government kind of has 4 key steps when it creates policy. It gathers data from its citizens through a variety of mechanisms, but elections are kind of the most important. It then goes ahead and designs policy, hopefully reflecting the will of the citizens. It then implements that policy, and in a really good government, it evaluates that policy with some degree of rigor. And at each of those steps, we want to be able to put data and advanced analytics at the core. So on that first step, kind of using data to inform public policy from the get-go, we've come up with a couple of interesting ideas in which data can be particularly useful and will become increasingly useful with time. A great example is with respect to crime. You see governments increasingly creating databases, geolocating where crimes happen, using predictive analytics to try to prevent the incidence of crime. It could also be useful in the generation and transmission of electricity, where, for example, you could see in the future utilities being able to better predict supply and demand of electricity. In the second phase of government, once you've sort of solicited information from the world, whether it's from citizens, from ambient sensors, you have to actually implement policy. And in the implementation of policy, there's a kind of a dialogue that happens with citizens, and you see an increasing use, and hopefully in the future, kind of a deeper use of applications that directly connect citizens to government, that democratize participation, that encourage ownership of all people, of all citizens in the policymaking process. The third piece, and arguably the area in which the most has to be done for governments, is in the evaluation of policy and the iterative process that should exist in government for creating increasingly successful policies. So today, governments by and large are relying on administrative household survey data in order to better understand what their citizens are doing. And that leads to a certain amount of quantitative methods being able to kind of guide the creation of policy. But at the end of the day, that's kind of a backwards-looking process. It has limited predictive abilities. And so what we see kind of looking forward is the opportunity to evaluate policy with very advanced sources of data, very advanced techniques, the kinds of techniques that Elon Musk talked about yesterday, things that are driving self-driving cars and so forth. So using Internet of Things and distributed sensors to collect data, analyze, and then predict the types of policies that will be successful, and also to very precisely measure their impact. You could also imagine a future that might be a bit more distant, in which technologies that are just coming onto the scene today, things like neural networks, are actually able to not only precisely determine the impact of a policy, but are actually able to pull from disparate data sets to create new policies that human policymakers may not have been able to come up with on their own. So we recognize that in this kind of utopian data-driven future, there's quite a few risks. We've listed a couple of them. I would highlight probably 2 or 3 in particular, one of which is how do you, as your government is increasingly driven by data, ensure that there's equity in the way that policies are created. And over-reliance on data without sensible kind of qualitative measures can mean that there's discrimination that's embedded in the system. There's also significant cybersecurity challenges, and I would also point out something that's probably very near and dear to people's hearts, which is how do you balance the public good with demands for privacy when you're considering collecting reams of data on citizens, processes, and things that are happening in an economy. And so on that note, we all recognize that many of these technologies are just beginning to be implemented in government today. But what we would emphasize is that governments need to put data at the core of all of their decision-making processes. And the way to do that is not only to build out the technical infrastructure to do that, which consists of sensors, applications that citizens can use, data warehouses that enable sharing across ministries, but also bathe civil servants and politicians alike in fluency in data. And then finally, and perhaps the most important, educate your citizens around the importance of data in creating policies that, again, reflect the realities of the world rather than politics or ideology. Thanks.
On behalf of China Europe International Business School, we would like to present you our thinking about how to shape the future government. But in the beginning, we think that it is not possible to answer this question before answering that how will the future look like. But of course, it's hard to predict the future. So what we can do is we start from some obvious phenomena that we have observed in the near future, and then we push it further. So surprisingly, our analysis reached a conclusion that there is a potential revolution of employment. So let me explain. In the progress of globalization, the labor-intensive jobs have been shifting from developed countries to underdeveloped countries. But we believe that this flow will be cut off by new technologies, such as artificial intelligence and also self-driving technologies. So in the future, there will be people in the developed country that will no longer, these new technologies will simply erase all the labor-intensive jobs which exist right now. So there will be two perspectives. One, from the perspective of development country, the people will no longer have to work. And on the other hand, the people from underdeveloped country will no longer have a job. So as a result, those people who don't have to work will start seeking a new meaning of life. And those people who don't have a job in the desperate situation will put a threat to the global peace and the global situation. So either way, they are not happy. So in light of this effort, we think that the mission of the government will also be converted, will also be evolved into a new shape. And happiness will definitely be one of the top priority. And then also we get some inspiration from Confucius' philosophy that in his narrative, he described the perfect society as commonwealth of great unity. So which emphasize a lot on participation of people and also transparency of information. And more importantly, the people here, it's not just the people from one single country, but human being as a whole. So with this mission in mind, the function of the government will also evolve. Instead of the fixed function, like, for example, education, like environment, the government function will more like a service. It will become to a service platform, data-based service platform, that you will not even notice if no service is required. So with this mission and function in mind, our team, we designed the new structure of government. And as we can see from this chart, this structure have two levels. Let me explain first on the national level first. So on the national level, this structure has three components. The first one is the base, which are the people. And the second one are the platform, a data, advanced technology-based platform. And the third one is simply an auditor, or we call facilitator, that will make sure that this platform works. So how will this system work? So in the future, we think that everyone among us
can request a service or make a proposal to this platform. And the platform will then evaluate this proposal and then forward the valid and feasible options to a group of people who are selected to make a vote on these options. And then if this proposal or request is passed, then this request or proposal will be immediately enforced. So, and we think that they have like 3 advantages about this system. One, people who are selected are based on their value to the society, which includes their knowledge, their influence, their interest to this matter. And then, the selection process will create a social significance to these people, and which will also link to happiness. And the second advantage is that the entire process will be totally, completely transparent, which will create a trust between people and the platform as a whole. And the third one is the equality. Since everyone can make proposal, everyone can join the process of evaluation, can make their input, then equality to a certain degree will be achieved. And then move on to the global level. Since this structure is so simple and so scalable, then we think that every country will have one system. And the information will flow and the best practice will flow between all these systems. And this will also give us 3 advantages. The first, that since the information input to make any decision is from all the systems, is from all the countries, so this system will better address the global issues. The second one is that since the best practice is also shared by all systems, so every country can have a benchmark between their performance with the best practice in the world. And the third is efficiency. Since the asymmetry of information is eliminated in this system, so we believe a great efficiency will be achieved. Of course, that no system is perfect, right? We can already foresee some risks like vote protect the minority, like the voting abuse. But more importantly, just like the original word of government said, government means to pilot the ship. As long as I believe that as long as we can keep doing, then this future will be shaped. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I want here to demonstrate our vision for the future of governments. We envision it as to be a virtual government. How it's going to look like, what is really virtual, and what we need it to be delivered, and the impact it's going to make. That's what we're going to go through in these presentations. How the virtual government is going to look like is the virtual government is no more that government that is to you, that's been made traditionally. It is not the government with you that we just connected to you. It is the government that is driven by you. This is the insight that we want to make here through the concept of virtual government. This virtual government is how it's going to look like. It is the virtual government is an ecosystem of a shareholders, not a stakeholder anymore. It's driven by the concept of governance-less. This governance-less concept is about the impact that there is the citizen itself is the driver for these services. There is the services that is clonable. That's mean my virtuals that I made here can be repeatable in other nations that need my assistance. It is not the way that is. It is not the way that is waiting for the users to come in and ask for the services. We're going to chase those services through the concept called the agents. So we call it an ecosystem of virtual governments that is not locally in one individuals, but is actually across the how we envision these virtuals. It is about having a micro, macro, and mega virtual government. The micro government is really that one that is stated on every citizen or any entity that really want that service to be delivered. These agents that's going to deliver these micro virtuals, it's a small image. That's what you need your service to look like. It is no more that services that's going to be designed by the government for you. It is the service that you cook based on your objectives and how you want to interact with all other entities within that space. The micro government services, it is the one that belong to the nation. It is the nation that provided those services to you to deliver the best services for you. The mega virtuals is the one that may interact me with the globals. I know that a lot of my objective in the micro space and the micro could be limited, but we make it more visible through the mega concept. It is not a restricted environment, it is a more collaborative environment. And then what we want to have it is this, how is going to really work, that's how it's going to really work around. It is the services that the micro virtual is going to be provided for its micro as citizens. So those is not going to be customized. It's not going to be that one that is delivered by the government itself. It is the one that I specify in the system itself through its cognitive engine. It want to deliver the best one that's going to very specific and customized to the objective of the those agents there. But one small example was here is like those. The way that you drive your education, it's about that I know the best way for me to educate. I know the services that the government is going to provide me through the microservices. But then what is about the insight that's coming from the global? The global that's really direct and know that there is a talent, for example, need to be created within that region. So I know where the talent located in my nations. I raise them, I monitor them through those agents that are installed in your mobiles and the robots that have been attached to them, the way that can we reach to them. Those services, what we call it, is very adaptable. Is not fixed. It's policy that we will inject all knowledge that we will give it in that cognitive unit. It's going to enclose the information that I capture from the IoT, the big data, those technologies that I came from there, and as well as those agents that are going to collect information from each citizen there about their behavior, their consciousness. So when I deliver the services, it is the services that really going to talk about them, the event that's really going to shape the way that's going to be act in these ecosystems. What does really need to be done there? We know that the technology is really the big driver here, but at the same time, there is a lot of legislations need to be done because as it is going to be virtual government, it needs a lot of policies, there are also laws need to be happen here because everything is going to be cyber. At the same time, the community should be aware. I mean, we need to have those community that is really responsive, the people that give me more participations. So we imagine this virtual government to be a rewarding government. The governments that will emphasize and we have have given each one the possibilities that if he contribute, he would get a huge value in return. As lastly, what is the impact that really want to make here? Those impact is like, we know the service is no more the one that I put it there and you access it. It is the service that will track you everywhere. It is the service that's really going to say what is the best for you and customize the one that is really good for you. At the same time, it is a global risk management. I know what is happening there in that virtual government, the global mega one. I know what is the information fair in terms of the crisis, in terms of whatever kind of information is happening in that nations. I can transfer it because it is a linked environment, it is an ecosystem that space of global innovation is going to be transferred to the micro and macro virtual governments. So it is a very linked environment. We are not anymore that one that is very specific, that is very isolated. We are more in a collaborative space. We are really driving the innovation here. It is one united innovations. So we have in mind within the nations, and we have the one that is in a global forms. It is adaptive policies. The policies is not anymore that person.
My name is Abdulaziz Al-Bassam, and I'll be presenting on behalf of Harvard Business School. And because we're so believers in businesses, we believe that governments should be a government inc. Before that, we need to start with where governments are today. Governments today, first, capital inefficiencies are a big part of government spending. According to Professor Clay Christensen of Building Sustaining Successful Enterprises, governments have patience for profitability, but impatience for growth, which leads to unsustainable growth among government-owned businesses and hampering innovation and economy. Another effect that does is crowding out private investments. That's not the best practice of how it should be. Another thing that we see is government responsiveness. The governments tends to be less responsive than they should be. Later adopter of technology and lack of education because of that. And the third is human capital. Even though a lot of governments have highest degrees, but that high degree of education tend to stop before going to the government. As we've seen in the conference today, education is a continuous cycle. It does not stop at one time. It continuously develops over time. And we think one of the important aspects of businesses that we can take to the government is that feedback loop, is that involvement with that educational cycle. So what are we proposing? Our vision is to create a vertical and horizontally integrated government that enables the private sector to lead the economy and develop speciality and deep expertise. We're doing this by emphasizing on 3 pillars. First, innovation and launchpad. What do we mean by that? Identifying competitive advantages that lays on within specific geographical areas of that government and bringing on entrepreneurs and foreign expertise into the country to take that to the next level of innovation and creativity. The second thing is idea exchange, enabling another platform yet to create another discussion and exchange of ideas between different expertise worldwide on the same issues that have the same problem. We believe one of the good ideas about businesses is that you need not to recreate the wheel, but you can start where other people ended. And the third is the vertically and horizontally integrated. What we mean is by vertically having link-to-link IT interaction, where request does not stop at one specific official, but requests continue from one person to another and kind of push that momentum within the government. And by horizontally integrated, what we mean is that a cloud computing that lays on a cover between all government agencies that tends to have that machine learning that creates that synergies and utilization between the different governments. So what do we see to create our recommendation? 2 case studies, as we are at HBS loves these studies. First, it's not but the Silicon Valley. And we looked at what makes Silicon Valley. And first, it's a community of capital and ideas, developing special expertise in engineering and other technical areas due to the close proximity to great schools like Stanford University, who happen to be with us today, and the small density of area that allows that exchange of ideas. And the other part is the culture of risk-taking. And that is what we see absent from a lot of government agencies, is that fear of taking risks, not going to the next level, and not being rewarded to that. We feel that this is an absolute importance. And the other case is Singapore, which they've done a policy climate in which they recognize that the government may not be the best business people. So what they said is that they're going to raise capital alongside with the government and going to lead the innovation, and they're going to stay from behind. And the other part is reverse innovation. Basically, the government would put in the problem and would allow it for the private sector, the entrepreneurs, to lead that charge of solving that problem. So What do we see the government? We see the government as a regulator, as an enabler of the private sector, as a platform innovator for innovation entrepreneurs to create the government, to solve a lot of the government problems. The first pillar of recommendation is education and raising awareness. It is fine to take risks. It's fine to fail as long as failure part of getting to success. We want to encourage that behavior among students and government officials from early on in their careers so they can take that forward. We want to create that ongoing education through the online academy and exchange of expertise throughout the world. And that's what we're proposing here. And the third is maximizing interaction between local talent and global talent that we're bringing into the country to kind of develop best-in-class expertise within that country. And the second is one-stop shop regulator. The thing that hurt businesses most is dealing with a lot of government bureaucracies. The way to do that is to create one-stop shop for all regulation, to be in one place, a paperless online infrastructure that would deal with licensing, visas, and other parts that would make it easier to do business and lead the economy forward. The other thing that we think is absolutely important is feedback and rating. Basically, the citizens are the government's customers. They're going to give feedback on how every service goes and give rating and a comment, and governments will be held accountable to that. And the third is public and private partnership. How? Creating a hub of entrepreneurs and government initiatives and experimenting with state-owned enterprises. What do we mean by that? We mean that there is a lot of groundwork that could be happening. Governments do not only could give capital to entrepreneurs to innovate and solve their problems, but also they can experiment with their state-owned enterprises throughout the different healthcare hospitals or airports that can be actually a leader of innovation in that place. So the access to capital, the experimentation with innovation, is that how we see the government going forward? Thank you very much.
When we look at the current forms of government, the current needs are not met today. When we met as a group, we decided to think, okay, so what are the current issues and trends facing governments around the world? We came up with 4 key areas that we believe we're all aware of in this room. But with that being said, the current forms of government are not sufficient for addressing these challenges in a speedy way. So the size, the scale, and the scope of these issues are beyond the control of what the government is able to actually implement today. So from a needs perspective, we have decided that from key areas, there's 4 that we wanted to focus in on. So first being continuous education, flexible policy, a sense of belonging and participation for the citizens of the respective country, and lastly, the correct stakeholders actually involved in making the change that needs to happen. So with that being said, we believe that our future government needs to be agile, lean, and human-centered. So how are we going to do this? What does our vision look like? In order to do this, the core of our structure will be facilitation between stakeholders. We envision that the current world of government, the new world of government will have a division called the Ministry of Facilitation. So the Ministry of Facilitation, their job is to then curate and go out and find the stakeholders required to solve the aforementioned issues. The stakeholder could exist of citizens, corporations, supernaturals, NGOs, and academics. This is just a short list of who we believe would be able to sit on these stakeholder committees. So once the committee is formed, they will actually be responsible for determining what an implementation plan looks like and potentially also funding. This could be across of the private sector, public sector, and NGOs, depending again on what that issue is. So the job of the stakeholder committee is to create, collaborate, and coexist within the government. The government is overseeing these issues, but really it's empowering and creating transparency with this facilitation model. So let me bring a little color to this and paint an example for you of a current issue of what we think this facilitation model could fix. So if we think about space trash, so currently in the current ecosystem, we have satellite equipment in space that is deteriorating. We're all aware of this. What's going to happen? Whose job and whose responsibility is it to fix this issue? So we envision the issue getting raised through the Ministry of Facilitation, this idea will get crowd prioritized, which I'll talk about in the next slide in more details. Once the issue has been raised, it will then go to the Ministry of Facilitation to create a stakeholder group. So they will create this stakeholder group through generating a curated data via big data. So they will actually be able to correct the right people on this group. So for example, in the example of space trash, we would be able to get individuals such as Elon Musk, corporations such as Big Orbit, who are currently actually working on this issue today. So they would be responsible for collaborating and coexisting together to come up with a solution to solve this issue. So once the stakeholder committee is actually created, the Ministry of Facilitation will actively work with them to use processes such as design thinking to really get under the crux of what the issue is and analyze the problem and come to a solution by working together as opposed to individually in silos. So we're now creating this collaboration model by bringing everyone to the table that's impacted. So lastly, if we think again about space trash, allocation of funding and implementation would be based on ownership of who was on this stakeholder panel. So for example, telecoms would be involved. Again, as mentioned, companies such as D-Orbit would be able to work together and potentially fund these issues to come up with a solution. So by working together as opposed to individually, we believe that the government will empower these individuals to want to solve these issues faster. And ultimately, facilitation allows for transparency across the process. So we really need to have insight into how it's being solved, timelines, and key ownership of these individuals. So the approach is bottom up. We want to use citizens to crowdsource the data. It'll be both a proactive and reactive approach. Proactive, meaning citizens will be able to input their ideas via a specific hashtag. The government will also be able to use big data to actually get a pulse on these data ahead of time. So in addition, policy. So what does policy implementation look like? We will be lean. So we want to use technology to actually remove the current bureaucratic and inefficient processes that exist in governments. So within our team, the one common thread that we found around the world was that there's tons of red tapes within governments that slow us down from thinking about the future. So we want to remove about 50% of those tasks and actually automate them through artificial intelligence and big data. This will allow us to free up resources to reinvest in the future. Another 25% will be delivered through the stakeholder model, as I previously mentioned. The last 25%, we believe, is where we can actually focus and think about the future citizens of tomorrow. So by automating, getting rid of resources and time, we'll actually able to, as we go into here, think about the capital market regulation. Tons and tons of resources are spent here. But did it save us? No, and we were aware of the issue. So by automating that, we'll be able to get ahead of the curve. So lastly, freeing up these resources will allow us to be devoted to a braver and a human-centered solution. Continuous education. We're constantly behind the curve in terms of technology. The planet is currently heating up and melting. All of these issues, governments don't have the time because they're caught up in bureaucratic processes that slow us down. If we think about 2030, 2040, 2050, we need to become more agile, lean, and efficient, but most importantly, human-centered. We need to think about the well-being of our citizens, and as well thinking about what are the current issues that they're facing and how can we invest and devote more time into our future state. So on behalf of my school, I'm very thankful for the opportunity and hope you enjoyed it.
Government 2030, Architecting Society's Augmented Intelligence. The very reason of our success as human species is our capacity for augmentation. We augment our minds and our bodies through tools like weapons, like language. More importantly, we augment our individuals by inventing collaborative organizations and social frameworks. We are convinced at MIT that the advent of artificial intelligence is nothing but the next natural step in human augmentation. And what do we mean by this? The first message that we want to convey today to world government leaders is that we should shift focus from a vision of the future of AI in society, from this type of vision where robots replace and take over human beings, to a much more realistic and relevant vision of a society of augmented intelligence. This society, as constructed by individuals, organizations, and algorithms, forming a rich network of interactions. So these interactions being between humans and algorithms in a multiplicity of forms that can go from simple information processing and representation to assisting strategic decision making to automation of operations. So we have talked about this vision of society on the advent of artificial intelligence, which has these two characteristics. It's hybrid nature, and second, it's a distributed nature. So therefore, what's the role of governments? The role of governments in the context of this augmented intelligence society, well, it goes twofold. First of all, it goes, and the simple one and the closest one in time is, well, what can government do to improve the delivery of government services, right? So this is the simple one, and let's start with that. This is a visualization of, it was developed by CACS researchers in Saudi Arabia in collaboration with MIT. What we're looking at is Riyadh, that's the capital of Saudi Arabia, and we're looking at anonymous traces of millions of individuals moving throughout the day, going to home and work. So what does this visualization, and what does this unprecedented data gives us? Well, for instance, if we want to assess the impact of introducing Uber to a city and see if the promises of Uber of decreasing congestion happen, well, we can introduce it and see. If we want to see what happens if we decrease tariffs of public transportation or answer questions as where should we put the next subway system, well, we can introduce those policies and assess the consequences in real time, because this information is gathered by mobile phones, for instance, and it's gathered in real time. So how is this transformative of the policy process? Well, this is transformative of the policy process because first, we have unprecedented data, detailed. Second, we can issue predictions that are relevant for policy. With this also, it assists us in policy formulation, and most importantly, it assists us in policy evaluation, closing the loop, which can revolutionize policymaking in the same way that rapid prototyping revolutionized software and hardware development. So, of course, I've just talked about a basic example with transportation, but you can read cutting-edge research on this exact type of framework for transportation, labor markets, justice, energy, health, etc. However, that's not what I want to talk the most today, and this is the second message that we really want to convey to world government leaders, which is the focus should not be on this type of applications right now. That is the most comments that you hear in even talks today, in the past days in the summit, but really the big challenge and the key role of the government, of the future government in the context of the advent of artificial intelligence is its role in architecting the frameworks that are needed for a society of augmented intelligence to flourish, to increase welfare while preserving fairness and ethics. So, and that's a big challenge. So let's talk about it a little bit. So what type of frameworks are we talking about? So let me give you first a line of action. First is, well, society's nervous system, and that is the ecosystem of data and transactions that are needed for enhancing and allowing that society of augmented intelligence to function. And so what type of things, what type of frameworks are there? Well, human-centered privacy and ownership frameworks. These are technologies that are already being developed, but we encourage governments to get involved because researchers are developing them. So what type? There's like personal data stores, there is data unions that put the person in ownership of the data and in control. There's other things like data security, and there's technologies that are being developed like multi-party computation where the data can be distributed and stay there, yet you can compute, algorithms can compute across data even if it's not physically present in the same location. Smart digital contracts and blockchain. Second, again, this is of course a quick presentation, but please approach us and approach researchers because it's relevant to engage government. Secondly, society in the loop framework. Society in the loop frameworks basically means that humans and society needs to provide the expectations and value functions for algorithms, and it needs to be evaluating thoroughly the outputs of these algorithms. There are several technologies along these lines, and again, please approach us and talk about it. But this goes from OPAL, which is open algorithms, transparent algorithms, to algorithmic technologies for algorithmic accountability and technologies for algorithmic fairness. That is how to encode algorithms that are not only optimized, but are also constrained by ethics and fairness. So, and thirdly, and to finish, of course, there will be shifts when we go towards this augmented intelligence society, and shifts in labor. And so we do need an education, a revolution in education, and the government needs to be a leader on this. And so, for instance, you can imagine the future of governments less as today's bureaucracies and more like what a Google office looks like. And that needs a strong revolution in education. And second, there's vulnerable segments of society that needs to be attended so that we avoid the effects that, for instance, globalization had on sectors that were forgotten by globalization, and today we have consequences like Brexit.
Thank you, MIT.
That's it, actually.
Let me get a moment to start and say how grateful we are to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us and for pulling such an amazing event together. It's been great to think about future governments. It's a challenge that we don't usually have in our everyday lives, and we think it's actually very good that somebody's addressing the issue, because governments is probably the slowest thing to change when we talk about global challenges. So today we talk about the future of government by Imperial College Business School. Okay, so it was a pleasure to work on this topic, and let's start from the very basics. Okay, so at Imperial we believe that government change and industry change comes from empowering future leaders. And this is something that will be reflected on the plan that we came up with. So, looking at operations, service delivery, and policy making, the three important functions of government. We're looking that the future will bring operations and service delivery mainly done by artificial intelligence. So the government will free up and be able to tackle challenges and be agile and actually have a supervisory role over the delivery of services and giving really quality care to the citizens. Now, the challenges of government nowadays, and I think the traditional challenges of any government at all times, it's to engage its citizens. It's to be transparent, it's to be innovative and agile, and these things don't actually happen. You know, if you look at the government model, it's been the same over the last century. The exact same thing. You have the ministries, you have the ministers, you have the prime minister. We're looking to change that. And of course, at the very end of all that is the citizen, who is basically felt alone, outside of the equation of the government, and he feels, or she feels, that their needs are not met, that he's not in focus of the whole service administration. So we need to change that. We need to change that because the clock is ticking. The challenges of the future, like climate change, like border security, like counterterrorism, all these things require very agile governments that put the citizen in focus and make sure all the needs are met. So, just to make sure we cover all bases, we came up with a framework. It's a framework that's based on PwC, but we edited it to make sure we cover all the bases, and we created this analysis base. We analyzed the internal stakeholders, the market externalities, the external stakeholders, and how they can influence a citizen-centered model of government. And we believe that the three lenses of government is to engage, enable, and be accountable to its citizens. So these three functions are the core of a successful future government. A future government has to be innovative, transparent, agile, lean, and connected. And all these things can be enabled with artificial intelligence, can be enabled with blockchain technologies, could be enabled with all these different digital transformations we have around. So our new mission statement, it might sound deadly obvious to you, but we think that the future governments need to actually serve the citizens and maximize collective well-being. And this is really important, and happens through 4 different ways. Engaging the citizens, administering effective services, having a lean structure that embraces change instead of resisting change, and to be accountable and transparent. So let's start with engaging the citizens. We believe that a good citizen, especially in the era of automation, has to be able to be subsidized for its participation. We believe that it's possible to create a system of basic pay to everybody that is left out of the equation to make sure that they engage with politics, to make sure that they vote, to make sure that they are present in all the different functions of government. And of course, this has a huge return on investment for the future governments. More involved citizens means citizens that are actually more happy with their lives. It means that they're citizens that are more economically active. It means they're citizens that actually create wealth and generate innovation to society. We also believe it's very important to rate the work of government officials. We believe that citizens should be able to rate on an app how the ministers are doing, and based on that, the ministers should not be able to run if they get a negative, let's say, ranking, or they should actually be able to get a bonus or another incentive for being successful. And finally, we believe in simplifying information for the citizens, making a streamlined virtual hub where the citizens can check everything in government, from where the pensions go to how they can make change happen. The other thing is how to deliver effective and transparent public services. We believe in lifelong learning and skill development, especially in near automation and the need for extra skills to make sure that people are not left out from the labor market. We believe that people should be able to decide the percentage of the tax to be allocated in personal projects. We believe in governments giving the freedom to citizens to do that and to be able to decide on a collective basis, especially on a local level, where they want their money to be spent on local projects. And we believe in a tailor-made system of smart notifications, where each citizen gets government information based on what they're doing in their normal life. If you're an entrepreneur, you get legislation notifications about new rules for entrepreneurs. And we also believe in lean structure. We believe that the government should have functional areas, not ministries. It should work on synergies, it should be entrepreneurial. Instead of having a Ministry of Education, you have a Department for Innovation and Technology with an education team, an infrastructure team, a public-private interface project team, and they all work together and create synergies between them to tackle the challenges. And all the logistics can be taken on with artificial intelligence and so on. Finally, accountability. With using a blockchain system, we can trace and identify every single transaction in the future government, basically eliminating corruption and making sure that the citizens can see every single government action take place and be recorded on the servers. We have to end impunity. Ministers should not be protected against the law. And we have to make sure that the governments use artificial intelligence to have an accelerated response to crises and to deal with all sorts of climate change brings, all sorts of big challenges, or cybersecurity. It has to be very agile, and artificial intelligence can play a very big role in that. So we looked at all these different sectors. We look at engaging the citizens, administering effective services, having a lean structure, being accountable. We think this is what the model for a future government should be like. And we are very proud that we are here to think about this challenge today. We are very proud that we're in Dubai, a place that leads government change in many ways. I mean, you can see that's a very entrepreneurial model of governance. And we truly believe that Dubai is the place that completely captures this sentiment expressed by Abraham Lincoln, that the best way to predict the future is to actually invent it. So at Imperial College, we think that the future governments would really truly depend on the power of the citizens and on the power of decision makers to actually come up with innovative solutions and actually create the future. Ultimately, we want the people to be proud of the governments. And this is something that is very hard to achieve, and it needs collaboration from everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
My name is Hamada Zahawi. I'm from the Harvard Kennedy School. Over 50 years ago, John F. Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." That was a government of his day and of his time. Today, the world is changing at a far, far faster pace than we can imagine. 90% of the data of the world collected today has only taken place in the last 2 years. That's incredible. And that technology and that pace is putting us at a fast collision course in terms of how exactly we're going to be able to manage that data and manage the people that are going to be able to benefit from that data. That collision course has set us into a certain world. It's people. The greatest asset that exists today are the people. And they're the ones who are going to be able to look at that agility. They're the ones who are going to be able to look at that collision course and be able to tell us and help us come up with the solutions and the challenge that we're going to be facing. Challenges such as environmental degradation, poverty, inequities, social unrest, water shortages. It's the people. But we heard just yesterday, Elon Musk, others saying, luminaries in the field saying to you, the more the automated world happens, and the automation will happen, and it will not stop, the faster unemployment will happen. The more disengaged people will become. The more disenfranchised they will become. That divergence is something that is scary. It's something that has to be responded to. And so, what do we have? We have to incentivize civic engagement. We have to restore a sense of purpose, the aspirations, the happiness, the ability to be able to push forward the well-being of the people. And how do you do that? How do you incentivize them to have a sense of purpose in a government where the future is automated? How do you do that? Well, why? It's people that will be able to push forward those ideas. It's people that have the skills, formal and informal skills. It's people that have the networks, the access to the communities, the finger on the pulse, and they have the time, and they have the energy, and they have the sense of purpose, and they have the aspirations. But they're not being used. That human capital is not being effectively used to solve it. There is a massive divergence. We see constantly initiative after initiative after initiative of case studies after case studies where there is a lack of stickiness, a lack of ability of these programs, of these concepts where people are involved, they're vested, and it's sustainable. There's a lack of that. There is a massive divergence there. And so, what is the answer? Well, the answer is this. The SIGGov coin. The SIGGov coin, I may look almost like a fake coin, but it is a virtual coin, okay? This coin itself creates that tangible connection, that ability for the people to have a vested stake in the government, and the government to have a vested stake in the people. This. But let me put it into you an example. That connection, where the government provides people with a SIGGov coin, and the people provide the human capital. Now we go from a disengaged to an engaged population. But it's a two-way street. Imagine what Kennedy said, ask not what your government can do, ask not what you can do for your government, but what your government can do for you, and vice versa. But think about this. It has to change. That concept of the old days has to change. And so what we try to do is we actually ask ourselves, how can we put this into an actual example? So let's think of this. Gustavo. The idea is Gustavo is uneducated and also unskilled, but he has a desire to give back to the community. And so he comes up with the concept of providing recycling for his community. And so what does Gustavo do? Well, Gustavo goes to the Ministry of Environment and tells them, I have this idea. I want to give back to my community, and I want to be remunerated for doing so. And so he collects, and the impact that he's had, the Ministry of Environment provides him with a SIGGov coin.
What about this?
Well, this you're going to be able to do a lot with. You can use it to cash in. You can use it for education, for food, for health, for utilities, all kinds of credits. But here's the best part. That coin does not just give you allowance to have remuneration, but it gives you a physical piece of the government. Now you hold us accountable. The government is held accountable for the actions. There is a symbiotic reciprocity between both parties. That is what makes this thing a unique experience. And so, how does it work on the macro level? Let's go macro. Well, you have impact-based valuations. So what you do is by the impact it has, the more bitcoins, the more not bitcoins, though the idea may have come from that, SIGGov coins you will actually get for your remuneration. But here's the best part, encourages collaboration. So now we have Luma, we have Jonathan, we have Luna. This is now a collaborative process. They can all work simultaneously together to be able to find the right solutions. And those solutions stimulates innovation. Innovation in and of itself. It's that innovation from the people that will allow you to be able to tackle those pressing challenges that we're going to be facing. That automation, that concept that is going to provide solutions to the future. And then through that, you also collect really critical data, self-correcting data, metrics, monitoring systems that allow you to see how this is being created. And what's the beauty part of this? This is not for just one country. This is universal. This is amplified globally. So every country can do this. Because before, they were held accountable through protests, accountable through taxation, accountable through votes. But now we have something that is universally, you can hold the government accountable, and the government can hold you accountable. And so what kind of government are we looking at in the future? It's a C government. It's a citizen government. It's a government where you have to now change what Kennedy said. Ask what your government can do for you and what you can do for your government. Thank you.
On behalf of the Said Business School at the University of Oxford, I want to say thank you to you all for having us here in Dubai, and wanted to tell you a little bit about who we are. Said Business School's mission statement is to be the premier global business school in a world-class university addressing world-scale challenges. So it's particularly resonant for us to be here in Dubai for the World Government Summit and to get to speak with you all about how governments will need to be designed and how they will need to be changed for the next 10, 20, or 50 years to meet those challenges. First, our thesis. We believe that the successful governments of the future will equip cross-sector leaders to build and operate networked organizations. The operative points there are that it's about the leaders and the organizations. We cannot possibly know what the future holds. We know that it will hold change, it will hold disruption, and we can prepare our minds, our people, our structures of our organizations to address them head on. So first, we'd like to review what we've heard here at the World Government Summit. From Elon Musk just yesterday, he told us that we can't possibly forecast 50 years out, can't possibly have any accurate predictions about the future. So we take away from that it's about a prepared mind and a prepared sense of adapting to change and having the tools and resources at your disposal. Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum highlighted, in addition to the head of the UN, the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement to solve the world's most critical challenges at the intersection of the public, private, and social sectors. And finally, His Highness has told us that the full potential of the UAE, its government, and the wider region will depend on the training in management and administration among the young leaders of today who will lead government tomorrow. Second, we'd like to look at structural shifts in the world. What is the world telling us today such that we can anticipate how governments will need to be designed to deal with those macro challenges? Unquestionably, we're in an era of multipolar competition. Long gone are the days of the Cold War, of US dominance, and I say that as an American. We're in an era of multipolar competition where the winners and losers will depend on who can build the strongest alliances, who can persuade the most number of organizations and peoples and sectors, and who can trade, invest, and build together, much as the UAE and India are today. We also hold that the future of government will be a competition for foreign direct investment. Now, why is that? It varies country to country, but the theme is clear. No singular country today has the cash resources, the natural resources, the human resources to not innovate and to not compete with each other. You look at the Gulf countries, and there's a pivot away from petroeconomies, investments in human capital to adapt. You look at the United States or Japan, there's local indebtedness at the household, personal level. All of those mean that in an era of low productivity growth, which is what we forecast for the next 10 or 20 years, that competition and growth will be based on drawing investment, new resource allocation from abroad. That has implications for how leaders will need to look and how they will need to work. And third, though it pains probably all of us to say, there's a secular rise in geopolitical volatility, thanks in no small part to these two gentlemen. What that means is that countries are going to need to be better networked with each other to adapt, to communicate, and to diffuse problems before they erupt into larger, damaging events. All of this outlines a fundamental problem with the way governments are structured today. It is a design challenge that's basically been a problem since Westphalia. That is that our problems over time are increasingly interconnected, whether it's financial markets, environment, terrorism, cybercrime, but the reach for our governments are legally confined to their own jurisdictions. There's a solution, though, and it's a soft power. It is multi-stakeholder engagement across the public, private, and social sectors and into other people's territories and countries in a positive and collaborative way. We'll come back to this. This brings us back to our thesis. We believe that the future of government will have cross-sector leaders in networked organizations. We look first at competencies. Among the competencies we think are most relevant are advocacy, capital, and technology. I'll go into depth on each of those. And second, the networked organization is not something in the distant future. There are pilot projects at any government, including the UAE, at the federal level, or local municipal levels could undertake right now to get started. First is stakeholder engagement, advocacy. We too often presume that just because someone works in government, they're actually good at politics. They're actually good at persuasion, coalition building, engaging and listening, that they have the empathy required to build outcomes that they can get agreement on. These are two exemplary stakeholder engagement frameworks from the private sector, which is particularly good at stakeholder engagement. They are particularly good at lobbying and building coalitions in ways that governments will need to catch up to. Second, capital. Governments are no longer bureaucratic organizations. Government leaders will need to be rainmakers. Government leaders will need to know how to communicate with the private sector. They will need to know how to prioritize investment sectors. They will need to be ambassadors for projects and understand the project level finances. And third, technology. Most of us are not coders and will not be coders, but we will need to know how to work with teams of specialists to create adaptable and fluid and flexible solutions to deal with the increasing dislocations at the local level. One example would be, hypothetically, in the United States, if you had a worker laid off at GE Appliance Park in Louisville, Kentucky, who gets a job at the Spartanburg, South Carolina plant for BMW, that person will need to retrain. Massive online open courses are an opportunity for governments to fill that gap and help people move quickly into the next opportunity. This brings us to government as an organization. Governments are seen as bureaucratic, as monolithic, as siloed, in most part because they are. If you look at the advents in terms of human capital and models in the private sector, and even very disruptive organizations, including certain terrorist organizations, there's a move towards flexible models.
Thank you, Oxford.
Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you for being here. A quote that comes to mind from one of my greatest mentors is from Robert Gates, who was the former Secretary of Defense for the United States military. And he said when it comes to military action, the United States has a perfect record. We've gotten it wrong every time. And I think when it comes to government, this is another lesson learned in that many things that government does, they get it wrong. They have a preconceived notion of what the future holds, and they create a structure to find that solution, instead of allowing the emergent opportunities from untapped human potential to come forth. So as we thought about the future of government, we thought, what would be a methodology that would take things from the top level and bring it to the bottom? And at Stanford, we're enamored of design thinking, and we think design thinking is the platform to be used in the 21st century for the future of government. We're a group of students from across the spectrum of government, across the spectrum of finance, consulting, entrepreneurship, and yet all of us have this in common. We're focused on design to help define our lives and define innovation. So what should the future of government look like? We believe government should be a design thinking organization that puts constituents at the center of all they do. This requires being empathetic, creative, and action-oriented. And those of you familiar with design thinking know it's a 5-step process. If you can devolve this process down to the basic entity levels, you can find out what matters to people most and create a responsive organization that can fulfill their very needs. So what is this solution, and what are the constituent parts? First, we want to use design for every process and every policy. We want to train government employees and government policymakers in the design process to talk to the lowest possible level individual to figure out what they need and how to make it happen. We want solutions based on the actual needs of identified users. When it comes to welfare policies, who are the people affected by this? When it comes to technology, what are the implications? Who are the users of the end state that can be better used for this? We want to focus on rapid low-tech prototyping as opposed to coming with large government bureaucratic solutions that may not be the right answer but waste time and money. And finally, we want a rapid, iterative process that will allow us to make changes on the fly to adapt to the needs of our constituents. So as we think of how government works today, it's a very top-level organization. We have national, regional, and local authorities. And with each of these, we have things like immigration, the economy, the environment, security, defense, et cetera. And right now, this is a very top-down approach. The federal government comes with a solution, they trickle it down to the regional and local governments, and they're forced to implement it. What we're seeing, though, is this entrenched bureaucracy inhibits innovation and creativity. What if we reversed that? What if we looked at the local government creating solutions that percolated up? Let them define what the challenges are and what the answers to the solutions have to be. The role of government is not just to increase GDP, to increase happiness, increase the optimization of individuals, and unleash the untapped potential that is remaining in many of our societies. This has to happen at the local level. Now, the paradox here is that we're in a globalized society. We're increasingly interdependent. We have high-level organizations. But the things that will cause us to be better as an organization, as a humanity, are the things that come from the local engagement and the iterative processes. So what does this look like? We have 2 vignettes to walk you through. The first is we need to figure out what the challenges facing future citizens are and how to integrate that. So we have Christina here. She was a bus driver in London. She has 2 children. She's concerned about the things in her life that will be affected by autonomy and other things emerging in our society. Normal processes might be a policy-oriented look. They might be a top-down study. But we want to go talk to Christina. We want to figure out what would make her life better. What are the things that she's concerned about? And we believe that if people talk to these end users, they'll be able to create local solutions that will be better suited for these individuals. We can retrain them. We can focus them on new organizations. We can introduce them to opportunities the government's already selected for them, education, welfare benefits, other things that they need to survive and thrive in this new economy. Also, another example is Yazid. He's an individual who has an idea for how he wants to integrate in society, but doesn't know what the resources are available. There's an immense amount of data out there that we can gather about Yazid. We can take his social media profiles, we can take his search histories, we can take things that we know about him that he has voluntarily given to use and find out what the trends are in his life. What are the things he's concerned about? And proactively approach him with options that he can select from. Not a top-down saying this is what you should do, but here's your options. These are things you don't even know that existed that you can use for the future. We want to help empathize with this user, then define for this user what the end state should be, ideate and prototype with him or her, and figure out what the possible solution is through testing and refinement. Ultimately, the problems we face, we can't predict. We've talked about AI, we've talked about additive manufacturing, 3D printing, we've talked about things that may be in the future, but we don't know in 50 years if those are actually be relevant. But we can create a methodology that in the next 50 years will be relevant throughout these decades, throughout the challenges we face. We think design is that solution, and thank you for your time.
I'm Nick, and we've developed a vision for future governments inspired by the conversations we've had here at the World Government Summit. So, the drivers behind the change, both enablers and challenges, are focused on 3 key areas. First, identity and demographics, with the individual paramount. Second, technology, with robotics, AI, connectivity, and big data posing tremendous potential, but also big risks. Third, one planet. We must hand the planet to future generations, and we must cherish it. These drivers will change the way government works, how it sets policy, what it does, and how it is organized. So, the intent behind decision-making. This will be guided by 3 considerations, enabled by big data and dynamic evaluation of citizens' values. There will be forward-thinking, anticipate change, thinking about future generations. We will see more planning, like the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, from oil proceeds. There will be global and outward-looking, thinking about how decisions affect others. For example, that failure to address climate change means Bangladesh will lose half its productive land by 2080. They will focus on well-being, social support, trust, life expectancy, freedom, generosity, and GDP influence gross national happiness. This will require a fundamental redesign of services around individuals. Design-led thinking will allow citizens to serve themselves in the most effective and efficient ways possible. For example, citizens will carry national ID and become the CEOs of their own healthcare. As we heard in the Future of Healthcare event yesterday, cross-hospital data exchange will save lives. Governments will plan for the future, but budgeting will be dynamic. In the words of Prof. Nye at Harvard, we should combine the best of markets with the best of government. If government is best at setting agendas and regulating, this is what they should do. In our new vision, we advocate a local, devolved, and a global central decision-making process. For big strategic issues that affect everyone, power must move to a new national government and away from national governments. For issues where local bespoke services are needed, citizens need empowering. To give examples, education choices will be driven by local economics and requirements. Just as we heard from Elon Musk yesterday, the possibility of life outside Earth needs collaborative exploration. Tax systems currently lead to arbitration opportunities, and we exploit them. And this requires collaboration too. We've seen the development of powerful localities. San Francisco, the biotech hub. Dubai for innovation. London for finance. They compete on a global scale and are increasingly specialized. But when faced with innovation, as the quote says, we should be made to feel uncomfortable. The nation state is the product of orthodoxy and convention. We need to think beyond this to solve the issues of tomorrow. Currently, as you'll see on the left, nations hold the veto on, for example, the Paris Climate Change Agreement. In our new vision, big macro issues are taken by a global body with empowered citizens making decisions at local levels at whatever hierarchy they choose, be they towns, cities, countries, or regions. By 2050, nations have become stewards of tradition and culture. The national veto that stops progress on global warming, that hinders economic development, and that threatens the future of the world has no place in 2050. But we realize that this is ambitious. So we have one final insight to share with you. Just think for a moment about how civil servants are perceived today. Slow, bureaucratic, reactive. None of this ambitious agenda will ever be realized if civil servants retain this image. You, as the leaders of government today, and you, as the leaders of tomorrow, must never stop investing in people and their ideas to improve our governments. Then, and only then, when public service is universally seen as a worthy mission, will governments be able to solve the universal problems facing humanity. I finished a minute early. Thank you very much for listening.